back-breaking, dangerous delimbing work out in the woods to have Lupe and the boys smuggled across the border and brought north. But having paid a small fortune to Miguel's coyotes didn't mean Tomas and Lupe were home free. Miguel had made it clear that if Tomas didn't do what was required of him, what might happen to little Tomas and Alfonso would be worse than death. For the 1000th time, Tomas wished he had left well enough alone. Things weren't necessarily pleasant or comfortable in the little tin-roofed shack where Lupe and the boys had lived in Ciudad Obregon, but he'd had no idea about the real price of bringing his little family to the United States of America. So Tomas kept driving. He turned off the freeway at Cabin Creek Road and headed off into the maze of national forest roads that carried loggers and logging equipment off into the wilderness. That's why Miguel had come looking for him to do this particular job. Tomas knew all those roads like the back of his hand, because he had driven them himself, ferrying crews in and out of the woods. With severe winter weather setting in, the logging crews were out of the picture for the time being, until the snow melted in the spring or summer. Even though it made it hard to see, Tomas was grateful for the deepening snow. There would be no tire tracks left for the cops to trace, and no footprints either. By morning, all tracks would be nothing more than slight dents. And in weather like this, no one would be out there watching either. Only the dumbest of cross-country skiers would venture this far off the main roads. As Tomas drove, he wondered what the woman had done that merited this death sentence, but he didn't wonder too hard. That was Miguel's business, not his. Tomas stopped the SUV a mile or so short of Lake Cochise, at a spot where yet another road wandered away from the one he was on. The intersection created a small clearing that was barely big enough for him to swing the Forerunner in a tight circle without running the risk of getting stuck. When he turned off the engine, he was dismayed to realize that his prisoner was awake and moaning. Miguel had told him she was out for good, but clearly that wasn't true. Shaking his head, Tomas punched the button that unlocked the hatch, then got out and walked through swirling snow to the back of the vehicle. Opening the cargo bay, he reached in and grabbed the tarp-wrapped bundle. As he pulled it toward him, the woman inside struggled and tried to roll away. Grabbing for her a second time, his hand caught on what was evidently a cowboy boot, one that came off in his hand. It surprised him and bothered him somehow. He didn't want to know she wore cowboy boots. He didn't want to know anything about her at all. When he finally had her free of the floorboard, he let her drop to the ground. The force of the fall knocked the breath out of her. For a brief moment she was quiet, then she started moving and struggling once more. The mewling sounds coming from under the tarp were aimed at him in a wordless plea that was clear enough. "Please don't do this. Please, please, please." Tomas didn't want to do it either. But it was too late to stop. Too late to turn back. Tomas knew that if he failed or wavered, Lupe and the boys would become Miguel's next target. Tugging at the end of the tarp, he dragged her away from the road and into the shelter of a second-growth tree. Then he went back for the tire iron. Several blows to the head from that rendered the woman senseless. He knew what he was supposed to do then. Tomas had the needle-nose pliers there in his pocket, but he also knew, as Miguel did not, that pulling her teeth was something Tomas could not do. When his boys had lost their baby teeth, their loose baby teeth, Lupe had been the one who did the honors. The very idea of removing hers. Instead, he went back to the car and retrieved the gas can, poured the liquid over the now-still tarp, and lit the match. He had to light more than one, because it took more than one before the fumes finally ignited. When they did, he moved back out of reach, crossing himself and uttering a quick prayer as the flames roared skyward through the swirling snow. In the flickering firelight, he looked down and noticed that while he was wrestling